Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I will pause as we welcome all of our attendees in today to the webinar. See them coming in. Thank you for joining us. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at California State University, Long Beach. We thank you for joining us for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. Just a reminder, I want to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on a video library on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. Also, I want to encourage you to submit any questions to our guest speaker today using the Q&A box located below or above your screen for our guest speaker today. And now it's my honor to introduce our moderator for the chat. John Broadway is a proud alumnus of CSULB, graduating in 2017 with a degree in journalism. As a student, he was very involved in campus life as a president ambassador, founding president of the National Association of Black Journalists, and a participant of the Leadership Academy. John has remained involved with the beach as an active volunteer, and we're very thankful for his time. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to John Broadway. Take it away, John.
Thank you for the introduction, Noemi. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for today, Ms. Lori Polydoros. And she has been writing for children for over 20 years and has published over 80 books, articles, and short stories. Her latest work is QUAKE Chasers. It's about 15 QUAKE Chasers, 15 Women Rocking Earthquake Science, which was published by the Chicago Review Press in April 2022. She's a high school English teacher and community college adjunct instructor at Orange County. A longtime SCBWI volunteer, Lori does many author visits and writing workshops. When she's not writing, she may be hiking with the two unruly rescue pups, looking for butterflies, or traveling off the beaten path with her amazing two kids and her husband. Lori's lifelong dream is to tell stories that carry us away, give us a reprieve from the dark reality life can bring, and empower those without a voice. Lori holds a multiple and single subject teaching credential in English, a BA in journalism from CSULB, and an MA in creative writing. So please join me in welcoming today's 49er Industry Chat host, Lori Polydoros.
Hello, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to my chat. I am very excited to be back to the beach and, talk about what's happened to me since, but also talk about writing and journalism and how it all started for me in college at Cal State Long Beach. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to share my screen so we can have a presentation here. Okay, so I think we're going to go through, I'll talk a little bit and then we'll take questions, and really anything you want to ask is totally great with me. I love to talk. So I'm here to share just whatever I can about my experiences and what I do as a writer and a teacher, and how it all started at Cal State Long Beach. Okay, so these are just quick tips. I'm going to get right into it. If you've ever been interested in writing for children, I just want to give you a few tips, and then I'll go further into this later on. And any questions you have, just jump right in. If you want to write for kids, the first thing you want to really think about is what do you like to read, or what did you like to read when you were a kid? So really, to find your voice, you really have to dive into some of the age levels and the genres. We have picture books, early readers, chapter books, middle grade, and then young adult novels. Plus all the genres, fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, realistic fiction, dystopian, historical. So really, to find your voice, you just have to start reading. And once you start reading, you're going to see what kind of characters and situations you identify with the most, because as kids develop, obviously they go through, different experiences, different milestones, different, aspects of their psychology and their brain development. So I think to find your voice, really focus in on what do you love to read. And as you start to manifest that through your writing, it will be very clear what comes out. For me, I think my voice is probably upper middle grade to young adult, which is kind of that awkward phase between being about 13 to about 15. And I just think that's where my voice resonates. Most of my books, I don't get into the more raw situations about sex and drug use and all of that. I kind of think I am like perpetually stuck in that awkward stage in my life. And that's kind of what comes out. But I love those years because they're kind of magical. And I think you're old enough to understand like the realities of the world, but you're still innocent enough to like believe in magic and to believe in kind of idealistic, aspects of life. So I think that's where I like to sit. If you're not involved with kids directly, start volunteering, whether it's at schools. I'm a teacher. I love to have volunteers or youth programs at church, or just being nosy and like listen. Like I am so horribly nosy. If I go anywhere, my ears are always open and I'm listening to kids talk. I'm listening to their phrasing, and I'm not so much listening for slang and stuff like that, but just how do they phrase things? What are they worried about? What do they talk about? And what matters to them? And that really helps me. And as a teacher, I'm like listening all the time. And even subconsciously, those, elements come through my writing. Of course, the biggest thing, if you want to write for any genre in any age level, is write. You have to improve your craft and get to know the business. And I'll talk more about that. Take classes, join organizations. For me, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators has been the most impactful experience as far as meeting other writers, going to conferences, becoming a volunteer myself, and then meeting agents and editors, and really like feeling like I belong, because writing can be very solitary, you on your laptop in a dark corner somewhere, and you need a tribe, you need a group of people that help support you and help you, lift you up as a writer and help you get through those rejections, which we'll talk about. Join critique groups, go to conferences, really put yourself out there. You have to grow an armadillo skin to be a writer or any artist in general. When you put your soul out there, you have to be ready for feedback and for critique. And it's just a part of the business. So I think when you have a network of people that support you, that rejection isn't as painful. Be willing to take the feedback, and we'll talk more about that later, but ultimately you want people to let you know what's working in your writing and what isn't. And then that big R word, like be ready and learn to love revision. It's such a huge part of writing. All of my books have been revised so many times, I can't even count them on my fingers or my toes or 100 people's toes. Like I have revised so much, it's insane. And then learn that rejection is your friend, because really you don't want something to go out into the world until it's ready. And that can be painful, especially when you're on a long learning curve like I am. But ultimately it is, really something that we embrace as writers and really as human beings, because rejection means that we're going to go back and look at it again, and we're going to get better, and we're going to really hone in on what we're doing well and what we can do to improve whatever it is we're working on. So I think it's part of that growth mindset. So you definitely need that growth mindset if you're in the writing world. Okay. Do we want to stop for questions now or keep?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a couple. And just to clarify, the SCBWI, that is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
And it is an international organization. There are local chapters. So we have a Southern California chapter. LA has a chapter. So Long Beach would probably be part of LA, but also could probably pop over and be part of the SoCal, which is Orange County and the Inland Empire. But it is a worldwide amazing organization, and I highly recommend joining.
Nice. And the other question was, did you always want to be a writer, or did you want to be a teacher first and then want to write on the side?
I'm going to talk about that in my slides. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, well, yeah, I'll talk about it in my slides.
Mm-hmm. And then maybe you mentioned growth mindset, which I think is really important. But maybe if you want to just elaborate on that a little bit, just
Sure.
for
Yeah.
people who may not be familiar.
So if you haven't really, dove into the difference between fixed and growth mindset. Fixed mindset is when you approach life thinking that, okay, I'm good at this thing and I'm good at that thing, and that's all I'm good at. And when you fail, you're pretty much like, oh, I'm not good at that, and that's just the way it is. So you're fixed in your thinking, as far as your talents and your skills. Growth mindset means that you develop, you understand that you're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes really mark like milestones for you, because that means you're putting yourself out there and you're trying, and you learn from those mistakes and then you build on that. And it's the understanding that we're just wired differently, and some things are easier for us and then some things are harder, and we have to work at it. And with the growth mindset, you give yourself permission to make mistakes and to acknowledge the fact that you just have to work harder at certain things. And with that mindset, you're really going to focus more on the process and the journey as opposed to the reward at the end. Because for me as a writer, it has been such a long journey for me that I wanted to stop so many times. And I didn't stop because I realized that I enjoyed the process so much. And I loved the impact I was having on telling stories, even if I wasn't selling my work. And so I think that's what kept me going and made all those rejections tolerable, is because I focused more on the journey and the process, as opposed to, okay, why didn't I sell this novel? That means that I suck and I'm going to stop right now. So I think having a growth mindset is, I don't know how, I mean, we're a mixture of both, but really, I don't know how anybody functions with a fixed mindset, because you would just be depressed all the time. Like, because failure is a part of who we are as human beings, and we can't escape it. And the only way you can escape it is you put yourself in a cave and you don't ever put yourself out there. You get yourself outside of your comfort zone or take risks. So I think growth mindset is absolutely necessary for any field you're in. And also it's a part of like self-care and, taking care of yourself. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, it was definitely warranted,
Okay.
because that's such an important thing to mention. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the answer. I guess just one quick follow-up question, because you mentioned the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. We have another question about whether someone thinking about being a writer should join a society to explore the career, or do you think they should wait until they have a scripted book?
Oh no, definitely join now, because it will expose you to the ins and outs of the business. It will expose you to all the genres, like I mentioned in the beginning. It will connect you with people that will help you figure it out, because it's a tough field, and I think going in with a realistic view and hearing from people that are in it is so important, because, on the outside, it looks like, and most of you probably know, but any art form looks, like, oh, if I could only be that, if I could only do that. But when you get in it, you find out it's a lot tougher than you thought it was. And there's so much competition because there's so much talent out there, that I think the more you can be a part of a professional organization with professionals, the more you will be able to see, is this the right place for me? And, you might think you want to write for kids, but maybe you find out that you have more of an adult voice and you want to write, for adult fiction or, nonfiction or whatever it is. I think joining is a real benefit to you from the get-go. Yeah, I would join now, right now. Okay. Did you go on?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through my journey as a writer. This is kind of the trajectory, and I'll talk about each one of these things. It all started with big dreams as a kid, and then it slowly went up a huge mountain, and it's been a climb. But I'm going to tell you some of not only my milestones, but some of the tips I have that I think helped me along this road. As tough as it's been amazing. And all of my trials and my rejections have really made me who I am and made me appreciate different things. So I'll talk about that as we go along. Okay, so I think it first started for me when I was 6 years old. This was a practice letter that I wrote to Santa, and then I wrote the real one and my mom sent it off. And that year I got a bike for Christmas, and I'll never forget it. It was a green bike with a banana seat and tassels on the handlebars. And I think it struck me when I was 6 that if I could write clearly and I could articulate my thoughts, I was going to get some pretty cool stuff. So I think this was the first hook into writing when I was a little girl. And then I got into 4th grade, and I had the most amazing teacher named Mrs. Fielder at Dr. Jonas Salk Elementary in Anaheim, California. And I was a really shy kid, and I loved to write and I loved to draw. And she told me about a writing contest. And so she encouraged me to enter this story I wrote about a cat who had lost its family. And I was terrified because I was so shy and I didn't put myself out there at all. But you know how teachers are, good teachers are cheerleaders. So she encouraged me, and I sent my story off, and then I lost. But I realized that it didn't matter that I lost the contest, because I wanted to keep writing, and it was something that I loved to do. And the fact that she thought my story was good enough to enter was enough for me. And so from there, with a little encouragement from our teachers, I kept writing. And then I got into college, and ironically, I started off as an art major. So I majored in art my first 2 years, and I had a really interesting experience. So I loved art, but I found that in my classes, I would either get A's or I would get D's. And my professor, they're like, "What is happening with you?" And it came down to my inspiration. And, you know, artistically, if I wasn't inspired, I think I was a graphic design major at first. I was really worried that if I wasn't inspired by someone else's vision, how was I going to produce for them? So then, you know, I'd always loved art and writing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to switch my major. So then I switched majors to broadcast journalism. And I loved the film aspect. I loved editing. I loved all of that. But I didn't really like being on camera, you know, and here I am on camera. But I didn't like that part of the job. So then I switched again, and I switched to print journalism. And I had a creative writing minor the whole time. So I think I finally realized I was in the right spot when I started writing for the Daily 49er. And John, you probably had the same experience. I loved writing for the newspaper. It was so exhilarating, and it exposed me to so many different things. It just was a really great experience. I had some professors that really took me under their wing and encouraged me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And I just think it was a wonderful experience to me. And it really engaged me in, you know, campus life, because I lived at home the first 2 years, and then I moved out to Belmont Shore my last 2 years. But I think it was one way that helped me feel more present on campus. And I felt a little bit empowered, like, oh, you know, I can tell these people stories. And I looked for the underdogs, and I wanted, you know, I remember writing a story about the women's golf team because they didn't get a lot of coverage in the paper, and the coach was so happy. And I realized, wow, I can really change someone's life by bringing them to the front, you know. And I remember my first front page story. It was right in front of the engineering building. There was a kid on a bike, and he got hit by a car, and my friend and I were right there, and he was a photographer, so he took the photos, and I interviewed the paramedics, and we got our first front page story, and that was super exciting. Yeah, so I loved writing for the newspaper. And then my creative writing minor, I was able to balance. So journalism teaches you to be very, very structured, and, you know, very powerful, sparse language, and very accurate. And my creative writing minor allowed me to be a little more creative and a little more free flowing. And I had some awesome professors in both. And I think that the balance together really made me a writer that could write anything. Like, you're going to see that I write a nonfiction. I love writing novels. I'm writing a speculative young adult love story right now. Like, but I can kind of do it all because I think I had such a good foundation at Cal State Long Beach. And I'm very grateful for that. And then the one image of the marmot on the mountain, that's my first time I went rock climbing. It was Cathedral Peak in Yosemite. And while I was climbing, because I was the slowest one and the last one, I was thinking of a story, and it was about a marmot who learned to fly. So it was a children's picture book. But this all came to me as I was rock climbing, and then I translated it into an assignment that we had in a creative writing class. And so I think this is kind of where my path began, you know, as a writer.
I'm really glad you touched on the marmot, because that was definitely going to be my next question.
I know. I was like, that looked really odd there. Yeah.
We had one question that came up. So while you were at CSULB, were there any faculty members who mentored you? Yes.
So Susan Paterno was an assistant professor, or she might have been an adjunct professor. And she taught the investigative reporting class. And she was actually just back from a fellowship in Central America, I think with the Orange County Register. And I just admired her so much because she, she was out there in the field reporting in these very dangerous situations in Central America, during wartime. And she was a very passionate writer. And she did one-on-one meetings with her students, which I thought was very special because you don't get that in all your classes. And she pulled me to the side one day and she told me, she said, Lori, she goes, I thought you were very quiet, and I come to realize that you just like to think about what you say before you say it. And then she said, you're the best writer in my class. And I just went, what, because I was always comparing myself, which is what we do, I never, ever considered myself one of the best writers in the class or on the newspaper. I was always, getting like harsh critique from my editor and, you always doubt yourself. And she was, I think, the first person to let me know that I had something. And I'm forever grateful for her. And she is now, I believe, the chair of the journalism department at Chapman University. But it really made a difference to me because, we always compare ourselves to others. And if you try to operate in that growth mindset, you're not competing against others, you're competing against your previous self, right? You want to be better than you were a month ago, better than you were a year ago. Like that's all we can compare ourselves to because we can't control what happens out there because so much of it is at right time, right place, and I think if you're an artist or a writer, you just have to look at who you are now and have you grown in your field. And I think she helped remind me of that. Because when I started off, I was it was an opinionated, I was very much into social justice. And so my stories were not objective. And my editor was, really helped me learn how to balance two sides of the story and keep my emotions out of my writing. And so I think I just felt like I was on a rocky road. But I think, having someone like Susan Paterno, really made me say, okay, I think I can do this, So, and as a teacher myself now, I really try to spread that love to my students, I think, because it just goes a long way. You don't hear it very often.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like she was really impactful on me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so after I got out of college, and some of you might be experiencing this right now, I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't get a job. I would go for interview after interview for writing and every aspect possible. And I'd come down to the top 3 interviews and I just couldn't get a job. So my credit card bills were getting higher and my mom always said, Lori, you should be a teacher. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a writer, and I don't know. My mom always knew what was right. So finally I started substitute teaching. And I was able to be a substitute at my school that I went to. And my favorite teacher that I told you about, I was actually able to work with her a little bit when I was subbing, and it was really cool. And it just helped me realize that, okay, I love kids. I love writing. I love art. And I can do all of those things as a teacher. And I can actually have a stable salary and I can get insurance and I can impact lives every day of my life. And I can get summers off. So it became something that looked very desirable to me. So it wasn't my first dream job. My first dream job will always be writing, but I think it was a very and I think I was destined to be around kids. I know that for sure. And it came naturally to me. And it's a really hard job, and I'll talk about that. But I think I'm very grateful that I listened to my mom. I'm very grateful that I was broke after college and that I kind of changed gears a little bit because I think it's something that I can do every day where I feel like I'm making a difference. And I started off in Bellflower. So I got my first job in Bellflower, unified with Washington Elementary. And I did some amazing things in elementary. I taught there for about 10 years. And then I had my first child, and my son is now 6'5", and he's a film student at San Francisco State. And so I was able to really make, leave a legacy at the elementary school level. And then I took some time off, and I'll talk about that in my next slide. So I went in very idealistic, and then I realized how hard the job was. And I couldn't write. When you're a teacher, you're creative juices are depleted by the time you get home, and you literally feel like a zombie sometimes. So I finally, I took some time off, and I was able to teach part-time for a while. And while I was teaching part-time, I finally realized that I needed to balance my life more. So, like I kind of live with my heart, I write with my heart, I teach with my heart, and it's easy to give everything away, and you don't leave anything for yourself. And when you're an artist, it's really important that you feel fulfilled in your art, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled in my own personal, like, artistic journey. So I was able to take a part-time teaching assignment when I had my son, when he was little. And that's when I started writing for kids again. It allowed me to at least have a little bit more flexible schedule. And I was working just as much, but I had a couple days at home with my son and a couple days to like think about putting my experiences into words again. So one of the first tips I want to give you guys is write about what you know. I kind of have an obsession with dogs. I absolutely love dogs. I have 2 rescue dogs right now. So this is Oliver and this is Addison right now. But when I was a little girl, I was obsessed with dogs. This is my baby, Grayson, the one who's 6'5" now. And I had my first dog as an adult, and her name was Mo. So I started writing about what I know. And at that point, I knew about babies and I knew about dogs. So I wrote my first picture book. And it's right here. This is what it looks like in manuscript form. And it was called Don't Lick the Baby, because my big black lab would not stop licking my baby. So I wrote this story and I revised it 1,000 times. I never sold it, but it was definitely part of the stepping stones in my career. But I did write a lot about the dogs in my life, the dogs in, my family. And it really became something special to me, so much so that I started a writer's blog, and it's called Every Good Book Needs a Dog. So I think almost all of my books have dogs in them in some way. But that's my first tip, is to really, like, other than balance your life, like really write about what you know, because you are the expert in your own life, and you really want to, give that unique perspective that you have through your words and through your experiences. So I think that's what I realized, when I was able to take a little bit more time to focus on my writing. Okay. Any questions, or should we keep going?
You can keep going.
Okay. Oh, here's my blog. Yeah. So Every Good Book Needs a Dog. So going back to SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, the second tip I want to give you is just really improve your craft. Write. Everything you write, even if it never sees the light of day, is a building block in your abilities as a writer. I know that I was able to meet Ray Bradbury a few times, just a beautiful man and just an extraordinary writer. And he believed that you shouldn't even start writing novels till you're about 30 because of your life experience, So I've got about 8 novels under my belt. I have not sold one of them. I almost sold the 7th one, which I'll talk a little bit about. And I'm working on my 8th now. But everything I write is definitely something that makes me a better writer. I look back at my old work now and it's embarrassing. So, it is a long journey, and some people come to it very quickly, but I would say that's the minority. Most people are in it for the long haul. And, if you read about any famous authors that, have been rejected hundreds and hundreds of times, and you just got to keep going, and you got to keep getting better at what you do. And that's what I try to focus on when I go to my conferences, when I go to critique groups, when I take classes. I'm improving my craft, because that's one thing I can control. I can't control who says yes and who wants to publish my work, but I can control becoming a better writer.
You mentioned,
yes.
Oh, I was just gonna hop in because you mentioned conferences. We had a question about what are some really good conferences for aspiring writers?
Well, if you go to SCBWI's website, there are conferences everywhere around the world. You can go to remote conferences now, virtual conferences. They might be right in your backyard, or or they might be in another state, but they offer so many amazing conferences. I've also been to quite a few in San Diego. There's a San Diego Writers Conference. I think it's at SDSU. The La Jolla's Writers Conference is really great. In Santa Barbara, the Santa Barbara Writers Conference is amazing. I think those are the main 2 other areas, other than things through the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. But you can just, Google, you know, it depends on what genre you write. If you write for kids, I think SCBWI is a great place to start, but there are so many writers conferences everywhere and they can be expensive. That's the only drawback. So maybe start local or even virtual because they're a lot cheaper. And then as you get more serious in your career, then you can start spending a little more money because it's easy as a writer to spend more money than you make. And you don't want to be in that situation. But you know, you can write off all of that stuff, which is cool. And then you meet people, like putting yourself out there to meet other people and talk about your work is so valuable. So sometimes you can't put a number on that. And so I think that's why I justify spending money at times for conferences.
Nice. And we had another question about the writers' critique groups. People are curious, what do you find in these groups?
So you can look online as well. If you belong to SCBWI, we have in our local regions, we have a person who's in charge of, you know, monitoring and helping people find others to create these critique groups. I know you can look online as well, but honestly, the people that I've met and that I've been a part of critique groups are people that I've met at conferences or through my organization. And, you know, it kind of comes down to trust. You want to be with people that you trust. So it is hard to go into like a blind situation. You want to be with people that are at least writing in your genre. And it's always great if you can be in a group where you have published authors, you know, because they do have a different perspective, but you have to start somewhere. So my first critique group was, you know, just a bunch of us who knew each other from our organization and that we're at about the same level. And, you know, we've been in and out of different groups. And right now I kind of try to get my novels written first. And then I kind of, you know, plead and you know, hope that people will read my work, and then in turn I will read their work and give them feedback. So it's really about making connections anywhere you go. You know, if you meet someone at a conference, you can always ask, hey, are you in a critique group? Would you be interested in one? But I do know through SCBWI they will help you find critique groups as well.
We had
You have another one?
Oh yeah, there's another question. It says, has having a published book changed the way you see yourself as a writer? I think you mentioned earlier that you're still in the process of publishing your first book.
Oh, I didn't hear that last part. What was the last part?
Oh, it said, has having a published book changed the way you see yourself as a writer?
Oh, well, I've done, and I'm going to go through that. I've done a lot of freelance work. So in any writing, especially in children's writing, you can do freelance jobs, which are called work for hire. And I'll show you examples of those. Basically, they pay you a lump sum up front, and then you write the book, and then they have the rights to publish and do what they want with the book. So you don't get royalties. Royalties are where you get a percentage of your book sales. So this book that just came out yesterday, this is my first royalty-based book. So I've written about 80 books and articles for kids, but this is my first royalties-based book, which is kind of a big deal. So I think, has it changed me? I don't feel like it's changed me much. It just makes me so happy that someone said yes, you know, that someone validated my work enough to give me the chance and the opportunity. And I'll talk about the book. It's been a really beautiful experience highlighting these 15 women and their stories. And yeah, it's been really cool. So I don't think it's changed me other than it's just made me happy and very grateful to have the opportunity and to, you know, really be able to share these women's stories. So, okay, should we keep going?
Yes.
Okay. I said this before, and I just love that, that elephant. It's a chance to move forward. So you might feel like this after you get rejected, but give it a few days or a few months, and you might feel a little different. There's something that we say in writing. So like when you first get feedback, your initial reaction is you want to like explain it, right? Well, wait, this is what I meant. But. So we just like to say, just nod your head, say thank you when someone gives you feedback, even if it's a no. Put it to the side for a while, let it go, and then revisit it. Because once you're like more objective about seeing their, especially if you get feedback, good feedback is great. Once you get their feedback and you let it set for a while, it usually makes a lot more sense. And most of the time they're right. You know, honestly, like all the rejection I've got, it's because my stories weren't ready to be out there yet. The best rejections to get are the nice, positive rejections where they give you lots of feedback, and sometimes there's like one thing that didn't work for them. And you're like, oh, can't you just work with me on that? But, ultimately you just have to go with it. So I just think embracing rejection is so important in this field. Okay. So I was talking about freelance work. I learned really quickly to say, yes, I can do that. So I wrote cover letters. I contacted different publishing houses. My husband is a BMXer. So I put in a cover letter with Capstone Press, which is where I did all these books down here, that I was comfortable doing like books on extreme sports. And guess what I got? I got indie racing, motorcycle racing, dirt bikes, and I am not an extreme sports person, but I said, yes, I can do that. And then I did my research and I contacted the people I knew, and I was able to write these books. So I think as a writer, you just, in any art, you just say, yeah, oh yeah, I can do that. And then you go work your butt off and you do your research. I was able to write some stories for the LA Times when they had a kids reading page. And I wrote a lot about people in my family. So I just realized that writing can really like impact people's lives, even in your own family. I wrote for Highlights Magazine. And then I wrote a lot of books in the educational market. So all of these books over here, you would probably find in classrooms as a part of different reading programs, individual reading programs and things like that. So I think if someone asks you to write something, you say, yeah, I can do that. And then you go and you research and you contact, experts, and you write your book. And because you never know where those opportunities lead. With these capstone books, the first book I did, I believe, was the grizzly bear book. And that led to, I think I've done like 25 for them or something, but it is, it's like a domino effect. If they see that you work hard and you are good at revising and you're easy to work with and you're nice, and you're grateful, they're going to keep calling you. So definitely my next tip is never say no. Like you just, you figure out how to do it, because the opportunities don't come very often. And so when they come, you want to make sure that, you take it, you take that opportunity.
I have one just follow-up question.
Yeah.
I know earlier you said write what you know, and here you're saying someone says, can you do something, just write it. Would you like to maybe kind of elaborate the distinction between that, just so that's clear for the audience members?
Yeah, write what you know is when you're in charge of the book, when like when you have your own idea. I think it's easier to start with what you know. These are all freelance work. So I think the difference is, would I have written these books if I hadn't been offered the job? I'm not sure, with some of them, like I probably wouldn't have written a 200-page book about motorcycles because I am not a motorcycle writer. Would I have written the one about the California condor? Maybe, because I love, I just love nature. I wanted to be a biologist when I was little. So I think write what you know is a great, I don't want to say starting point, but if write what you want to read. So in this case, would I have wanted to read all of these books? Probably not. I don't read about indie racing on my own, but I wanted to make money and I wanted to like establish myself as a writer. So of course you're going to make, you're going to make these decisions. The book that I'm working on now is a young adult book. It has a dog named Christopher Robin. It has sci-fi. It has a love story between 200 years apart. It is set in Joshua Tree National Park, which is one of my favorite places on earth. So I'm still incorporating what I know and what I love into my work. But if somebody said, write about 15 women in earthquake science, I'm going to say, yes, I can do that, which was my idea in the first place. But, so it's just you just kind of have to pick and choose. And like I said, these opportunities don't come around very often. So if you can incorporate what you know in your work, do it. Or on the other hand, if someone offers you a book deal, and you want to write about how to camp in the woods and you're not a camper, go do your research and figure out how to camp in the woods. So I think it just depends on your intent and your purpose and what you really want. And for me, it was important to establish myself with editors that you could take these projects and run with them, and I could, revise. And I think in the big picture, it helps me in the long run. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So the last thing, you got to keep putting yourself out there. You probably all know Sisyphus. This is how my writing journey feels sometimes. You know, it's like you get up to a little point and then you roll back down again, and then you get up again and you get up again. And ultimately it comes down to, why are you writing? If you're writing to be famous or to make millions of dollars, probably not the right reason, because writing is very competitive. And, you know, the 1% is going to make that kind of money. But if you write because you love it and you want to share your perspective with the world, and you want to touch readers, and you want to share your story, and you want to tell, you know, like stories of underrepresented kids or groups, or, you know, what is your purpose? And I think if you remember your purpose and you remember the reason you do it, you won't feel like Sisyphus as much pushing that boulder up the mountain. You'll feel more like an empowered artist. You know, like a struggling artist is okay to be a struggling artist, you know, because we do it for that reason. We do it to share our point of view. We do it to share something precious. And you can only get to the top of the mountain by writing. So you have to write. Even if you have a full-time job like me, like I have to make writing a part of my day every day. So sometimes I'll sneak out, don't tell my principal, and I will go to Starbucks on my conference period. And, you know, I work on my novel, and it helps me remember that this is part of who I am. Even when I have 120 students that need me every day, I'm still going to make writing a priority. And I think that's something that all artists need to do. You want to go on, or do you have?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't
Okay.
sure if that was the last
Okay.
slide.
So I've been writing for kids for over 20 years. And some of you might know what a literary agent is. So an agent is someone who is your middle person. They help you polish your work, and then they help you connect with editors and with publishers. So I put myself out there for a long time, and I got very close to getting an agent so many times that I cannot count them on my toes and fingers. But finally, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, Twitter has some really cool, like they call them pitch wars, or like days where you can pitch your story for different genres. And so I wrote a middle grade novel based on my father's family. So this is my two grandparents. They immigrated from Greece in the 1920s, and they ended up moving east to West Coast. They had 5 kids. This is my father, my aunt. This is my father, my aunts, and my uncle. And they ended up in East LA, living in the Maravilla projects in the 1940s. And when my dad was 15, probably just a little bit older than this picture, his mother passed away of breast cancer. And then a year later, his father died in surgery. So that left these 5 kids, orphaned, Greek kids, orphaned in the projects of East LA. And they stayed together. The oldest was 19, and they had no social worker, no assistants, and they took care of each other. And they all turned out to be incredible people. So I interviewed them for about 5 years because their stories were just fascinating. And I turned it into a script. And basically it's the story of a 13-year-old girl who's trying to hold her family together after, you know, losing parents, and trying to maneuver, how do you be your own person, yet still be the glue that holds your family together. And so I pitched this on Twitter during a pitch session. And this wonderful woman, her name is Anne Leslie Tuttle. She works for Distel, Goderich and Barrett, an agency in New York. She liked my post, which means I could submit to her. So I submitted, I think 5 chapters. And the next day she said, send me 50 pages. So I sent her 50 pages. The next day she said, send me the whole novel. I sent her the whole novel, and I waited patiently. And then I got rejected. And I said, oh my gosh. And she mentioned a few things that I could work on. So I put myself out there and I said, and Leslie, you know, if I work on these 2 things, can I resubmit to you? And she said, yes. So I worked my butt off, and I revised, sent it back to her. And then I got the most beautiful phone call I've ever got in my life. And that's when someone calls and says, yes, I want to represent you. And I'll never forget it. I was sitting outside under 2 big mulberry trees in my backyard. And I just couldn't believe that I was finally hearing the word, yes, I want to represent you. And so she's been my agent ever since. I've been able to visit her in New York a couple times. And she's just been somebody that means the world to me, because I know she believes in me, and she believes in my work and my writing. And yeah, it's been a very cool experience. And I'm so grateful for her and for her support, because writing can be a really lonely, field, like I said before, and it means so much to know that she will support me in whatever I want to do. Should I keep going, or do you have questions?
We'll keep going. We'll let you to finish.
Okay. Okay, so the book that I had come out yesterday, it all started with me on the treadmill. So I like to listen to podcasts when I'm working out. And I was listening to The Big One, which is a podcast on NPR about the big earthquake, that will eventually come along. And I was listening to episode 8, and it was all about women in earthquake science and how many struggles these women have faced as women, in traditionally male dominated fields. And these women were incredible. Like, they have made such huge accomplishments. I was like, that would be a great book. So I pitched it to my agent, and she said, Lori, this would be amazing. Write a proposal. So proposals are really tough. It took me about a year. I interviewed a couple of women at Caltech. I had to figure out, like, what would the table of contents look like? What would I include in this book? What are the comparables? So it took me about a year, and we submitted the proposal, and eventually it found a home with Chicago Review Press as a part of a series called Women in Power. And the book fit right in. And I started interviewing them on Zoom. So then COVID happened. So I interviewed each scientist on Zoom starting last January. And it took me from January to about April to interview them because they're very busy. And, we're talking physical science, and I'm not a scientist, even though I love science. So it was tough. Like, these are geophysicists and geologists. And so I had to translate all of this science it's a young adult book. And you can see all my notes down there. So I interviewed them, I translated the notes, I re-interviewed them, and then I wrote my draft, and it was due May 1st of last year. And, so I wrote that draft, and I sent it out. Oh, and interviewing. This is a great quote from Terry Gross, but a couple of things that I really recommended for my interviews. I did all my research, like I talked about before. I tried to establish like a really open, casual connection, through the process. I really focused on follow-up questions. So I had so many questions I never even asked them because they answered with such rich, interesting answers. And then I really looked for that spark. Like, what was it about these women that I didn't expect, or that surprised me, or that really impressed me? And not just their, their educational background, but like, how do these women, like, what drives them? And so many of these incredible women, they lead with their hearts, and they are there to help people, and prevent disasters. And I was really touched by these women. So I wrote the draft, and, we did our interviews, and these are pictures of all of the incredible women in my book. And you can see all the Zoom sessions that we did, which wouldn't have been possible really before COVID. So I did a few through email, and I did a few in person, and then the majority of them were all done through Zoom. And it was super fun. Like, it was just the highlight of my day to talk to these incredible women. Very, very exciting. And then it became a book. And so it just came out yesterday, and you can see these are a couple of the scientists that they have the books now. And it's kind of like we had this like book together. So it's like 16 people, like had their hearts in this book. So it's been a really special experience. We had a live stream yesterday for my book launch, and I had 7 of the scientists there with me, and it was really special. I'm very honored to tell their stories. And we have our traditional heroes in society, our athletes, our celebrities, but these are women that go unnoticed, and these are heroes in my perception. Absolutely. And I'm so proud to be able to tell their stories. And I really think my journalism background helped me so much with this book, because I like interviewing, and I'm good at interviewing. And I think I was able to pull out so many like interesting things about them, and, present this to a young adult audience. And so I'm very excited about this book. I just couldn't be happier. And I love writing fiction, but like, if I was going to choose a nonfiction book to be my kind of like my debut, it definitely would be this one, because I just admire these 15 women so much. So I am super grateful for this experience. And I think that's my last slide. So the journey continues. I'm finishing a novel right now, and who knows, and I'm hoping to sell that middle grade novel that I told you about my dad's family. So we'll see what happens next. It's definitely the journey that we focus on.
Of course. Congratulations on
Thank you.
recent publishing of your book. And do you have any last closing remarks that you'd like to leave with?
I just,
all of them out there?
just go out there and find what makes your heart race. If it's writing, that's amazing. And I hope to meet you someday. If it's, music, or if it's engineering, or if it's coding, or, whatever it is, like find what makes your heart race and go out there and do it. And hopefully, you're able to make the world a more beautiful and more equitable place along the way. Because, that's what we do as human beings. So yeah, it's really been great to talk to you all. And thank you, Cal State Long Beach, for being at the beginning of my journey. I'm just very proud that I went to this school.
Yeah, go Beach. Woo.
Yes. Woo. Oh, I have my shirt on. See?
Hey.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, John. Lori, before we go, if any of our students or alumni would like to connect with you, can they find you on LinkedIn, or would you prefer them email us and we could connect you that way if you're open to that?
Either way, my website is probably the easiest way. It's just loripolydoros.com. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find me. And you can email me right through my website. Yeah, but in any way, if I can help anybody, I'm here, and I'm a teacher. So let me know what I can do. And like I said, I wish you the best in your journey. And yeah, I hope to meet some of you someday soon. Thank you.
Wonderful. And before you go, are your books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, I assume, as well? Any of your books?
Yeah, everywhere. You can buy them anywhere. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, John, for moderating. Lori, congratulations on a very successful career. We're very happy to have you as part of the alumni family. And hopefully one day we'll be able to have you on campus.
Yes, I would love that. Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Yeah, no worries. It was great talking to you.
Yes, you all as well. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please visit our website to learn about future chats like this and follow us on social media.